Dictionary podcast and having lots of fun. And Denise and I have been talking this morning and notice there is a substantial amount of concern among people and there's a lot of overwhelm. So we're going to talk about that. And I coined the term, are the winds of trouble making your world crumble? And so, Denise, when I said that this morning as a question, what came to your mind?
Well, lots of different folks that I've run into recently and throughout the last several months, especially when this all began for myself, where it was kind of like, whoa, I still have my own life to live, let alone dealing with the world and its troubles, and having this big, you know, change in the way things are run. And talking to some clients recently, and then observing other folks going to the grocery store and feeling that feeling, and just noticing, there's a high level of stress, and to try to people, a lot of people I run into, they're already managing so much in their life, and barely keeping up with the stuff that's in their own life, let alone dealing with all these external changes and whatnot. And some cope by ignoring the outside stuff and just whatever, I got my thing, I do need to do my thing. Other people do the opposite. They'll ignore their own stuff and focus on, okay, the world's got to be at peace, and then I can deal with my own stuff again.
Uh-huh.
So it's been interesting to watch. And then, of course, others, it's just overwhelm and truly crumble. Absolutely. So it's been interesting to watch and observe and just ponder about the winds of trouble and all the things that are happening right now, and how people are dealing with it.
Um, yeah, and actually, I think this has been a case throughout history. Humans have problems. I happen to be studying some history of France because of an ancestor that happened to be there, and I ran across a document on the internet, and they were forced out. They took their lands, and they had to choose whether they would do what the current regime wanted them to do, deny their, religious beliefs, or flee. And that's 500 years ago when one religious group took power over another religious group. So if someone's losing their lands, that's pretty troublesome. I say the winds of trouble are that way. But even in today's world, a lot of times we're afraid of, virus taking over, government crumbling, or, jobs and things like that, losing everything. So once we go into a panic or worry, it shuts down. Our mind has less capacity to think. We have less ability, actually.
Sure.
One of the things I use as a tool for my awareness tool is, what's the number of words I'm using in a sentence, the level of words, so are they long or are they short? Am I hyperventilating? Is my body sweating or getting cold one way, the other, too hot, too cold? So I check in with my body and see if my body is having reaction. I check in with my mind to see if I'm losing thought, if I have the capacity of major thinking. I check in with my emotions. So I check in, and after I check in with my emotions, am I too angry, too hateful, or am I too fearful and frightful? So all these, whatever they are, the emotions and the mind and the body, those are signals. And that's one of the purposes of a little dictionary we have, is to uh, bring awareness so I could do something about it. Because if I can observe and see what's going on, then I can do something about it.
Yeah.
Take a walk, or I could, you know, start to breathe. I can do something about it. And there's other things to consider. And I wrote some notes here that we may get to. But if the first thing is we can check in and observe, And our mindset, our heart set, and our body set, that can change the environment immediately for a lot of people. Because they go, wait, I'm acting like a 2-year-old here or a 4-year-old. Um, and so, anyway, any thoughts about that?
For sure. Well, I'm rewinding a little bit. I think a lot of people they get it's like when the tornado comes, they get pulled up into the tornado and they're spinning around with the tornado and how am I feeling? I don't know. I'm in a tornado, right? Like it's just a little there's so much going on. And I think if I think it's important to help separate the external from the internal and start with that and just say, okay, yeah, the world's in this chaotic state. There's a lot of others outside of us that are in this chaotic state, and observe that, but then separate it and recognize, okay, that is actually outside of me. Even with the story you gave with the ancestors,
Mhm.
um, there's obviously they have their response to what's happening outside of them, and the response is inside. That's the part that they have control. That's the part where they have choice. And then what's happening is outside. And so I imagine they had a lot of very intense emotion and response and action that needed to take place, because they could have froze in place, and I'm sure some did. Obviously not yours, otherwise they wouldn't you wouldn't be here, in mine.
Well,
We would
yeah, I mean, that very day that they were at, 5 to 20,000, because historians don't know for sure, but people were killed.
wow.
So there's death all around them in France, and so that's intense. I mean, if death is going everywhere, and we could go with instead of a war or persecution like that, you go to Europe, and there was times when they had plague, and people were dying because of that. And so, whatever the trigger is that is causing the intense emotion, little state, um, we just deal with it because we we uh, we always think in the moment if we're traumatized in a drama, that's horrible, and how are we going to get through it, and all of this kind of stuff. It doesn't matter what the drama is, it's how we deal with it. Well, that's not absolutely true because obviously, if someone dying, then they have to deal with that appropriately. But most oftentimes, it isn't at that level, and we overreact internally. We put we take the problem, the trouble that's coming at us, and it's like a tree that's overreacting. Can you imagine when the wind blows and it's just a soft breeze, but the tree is thinking, "Oh, wait, the weather's changing. We may have a tornado tomorrow, or
Mhm.
we may have a hurricane." Well, in some cases, there is a hurricane, and people need to board up their windows. But most of the time, 99% of the time, it isn't a hurricane. It isn't a tornado. It isn't an earthquake. It's the fear of it that's the problem.
Yes.
That is really where it needs to be addressed because we are conjuring in our mind all these possibilities. So we take those as each of those as a pathway. And so, but in our mind, if we try to take all those pathways at the same time, oh, this may happen, that may happen, and we put our fingers out as branches, is what I'm doing, of course, and we take a different path each way. Yeah, our mind can't have 1,000 possibilities come to pass, so then we're going to be past our capacity of thinking and emotionally managing it. That will cause rapid breath or no breath or holding the breath, the body reacting cold or hot, indigestion of food. Our language will change. We won't be able to have thought. In other words, we're being run by a brainstem of primal emotions, and that can lead to deep sadness, deep anger, deep fear, any of those things, where, that can cause major health problems, major health problems. Um, and so, or relationship problems.
I think that goes back to being real with what the trouble actually is.
Mhm.
And that has to be the first step, if so the tornado is actually 500 miles down the road, or something like that. Acknowledging what the real trouble is, and acting accordingly, and then choosing what you can do and what you cannot do, um, and not getting over so consumed that you actually do make yourself sick, like what you're saying. That you actually, you end up trying to predict the future and desperately wanting to know the future or whatever it might be, without appreciating, okay, well, where am I at right now? What am I doing right now? What am I dealing with right now? And moving back to the present and accepting the present, which is, of course, important for the immune system as well. So to be in the ready now and say, okay, what am I dealing with here in the now and today, so that it's not trying to fight all these, hypothetical and possible enemies.
Which it is impossible for all the possibilities to happen.
Yes.
So if I even take two possibilities, let alone most people have 10 to 20, um, even if I take two, no, there's just going to be one path. It's going to go one way or it's going to go another, because I have one body. But my one body can have multiple possibilities, but only one outcome. But our
Well,
mind thinks, it goes, okay, let's go this way, that way. What? Go ahead. What?
and there's some choice in that, right? Some choice in whatever that final destination is, based on, am I taking a left or a right? I was having a discussion the other day with someone about peace versus safety. And you and I have talked about that before. I don't know if we have on these recordings, but peace versus safety. And a lot of times, it's like, oh, I need to stay safe. I need to stay safe. That's the highest priority. And then peace is somewhere else. You don't have it because you're in survival mode. So I would like, maybe you can share some thoughts with peace versus safety, and of course, how that all affects this mind body stuff.
Peace versus safety. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Well, the irony to that statement of peace versus safety is, um, when I'm truly safe, I'm at peace. So it's not the opposite. So if I have peace versus safety, that means my safety is not peace. Safety in that case is I've got to be secure. I've got to have, let's see, all the money in the world. I have to control the people. I have to have all the food. I have to, a dictator wants a safety. So they they threaten everyone. They have all the money. They have all the control. But is a dictator who has absolute control really safe? No, they're tormented every night. They're afraid when they go to bed that someone in the night is going to betray them and kill them or poison their food. Or
Yeah.
they're not safe. They're not safe at all. In fact, they in the dictator's kingdom, they're the least safe of all.
Wow.
They're not at peace and they're not safe. So peace versus safety. In that regard, safety is meaning that I I have the least amount of harm possibility, but I'm living in a primal state. True safety is where I feel a calm, secure life, where yeah, there's possibility of something happening like not lightning or earthquake, but I have this state of the peace that you mentioned and tranquility that it's if it's interrupted, I can come back to it. I can easily adjust. When I walk, since I had an accident, every once in a while I notice my mind will go uh, to my in relationship to my balance. Well, I'm fine walking. I fell in a sporting event, so I should be fine, when I'm walking. But every once in a while, my mind will go, wait, you might fall. And I chuckle because that's what the mind does. And so it takes me out of my peace for just a moment. And then I go, I just, yep, I check in with my feet and the earth around me, the ground, the floor, and I come right back. And I appreciate the thought. I don't get upset at my thought because I actually want to be balanced. I do want to have that state, but I just don't stay in that place because otherwise, what I'll do is I'll get this little queasy stomach, like, oh no, I mean, every step I take, I may fall over. Who knows? Now, that I know that some people would laugh at that, would say, but if some people get dizzy and some people have vertigo and some people, eventually have a lot of problems, that becomes an issue for them. Um, but I use that as a metaphor because what if, and I have people come in, let's say they invested through stock market or other things, and then they lost it all. And now when they invest, they have this, oh, I don't know, I might lose it. Or they have relationships and they've been married 3 times and they're afraid for the next relationship because they keep getting hurt or betrayed. So true peace is not saying you'll never have unsafety, but be able to recognize when you're not safe and then come back, say it's okay, and adjust and bring yourself back home. It's like so that when the wind is in the tree and the branches are going crazy, you can go, wait, it's okay, and calm it down and bring us back home to real safety. That means I can adjust. I can adjust all the time. So,
Yeah.
thought or comment about that?
No, I like it a lot. The concept that true safety and peace are not at odds. Of course not. They come together. They are, I suppose, in a sense, one and the same when it's true safety. And then it is interesting too. You were talking about the dictator. You know how they're the most unsafe because they've got to control the whole world in order to be safe, which is of course impossible. Um, but that while that might be on the macro world scale, or on the national scale, or on the city scale, or on the state scale, whatever, but it's also obviously in our own home or in our own heart or in our own mind. If we're the dictator of our own space, then of course we will feel unsafe. Whereas if we move in the way you talked about, into a space of what is it, more acceptance as well as flexibility to change and understanding, and not a fear of pain or a fear of hurt or that kind of thing, but we get to have peace, true safety, all the above. So I know I'm just restating basically what you're saying, but that
No, and that's great, and that's fine to repeat because that's how it works. It's awareness comes because you hear it and you repeat it in your mind and listen again to the awareness and until you integrate it. Um, People that are wise actually use mind chatter in a positive way. They turn it, they listen to it, they understand it, they listen to other people and massage it and think about it. And so, yeah, you're doing great. Um, had a thought there, and it just went, phew, just went out. But that's okay. It'll come back in just a moment. Um, uh, so, what would it be like to have less of that chatter, though? Be able to take it, that chatter of, oh, is everything going to be okay? What is life like to not have 3 YouTube channels in your head all the time? You know, or all these voices going off and being okay. And if they do go off for a moment, you smile and then relax. I mean, to have real peace. Some people would be bored. They say, "Oh, I know what the thought is." There it came back. Usually that train comes back. So, um, some individuals are actually afraid of peace. They're afraid of true safety because they're afraid that if they're really relaxed, that at any moment that door will open up and their enemy will come in. She'll say something, or their their relationship, the other individual will do something, or the world will fall apart. They seek after something they're afraid of. And I just did this with someone that you know, actually. She wanted to be relaxed, but she was terrified of it. She was terrified of it. And I think we talked about it another time, but it's a good thing to review. That's when that crack in our world that creates it. So for some people, it becomes a Grand Canyon, but I seek after that which I'm afraid of. I seek after peace, but I don't know if I'm really peace, something's going to happen. Um,
I've
well,
run into
in other words, the fear of laziness for some, but I won't be aware. It has nothing to do with lazy. It has something to do with fear.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying I run into that also, where peace is is a terrifying thing for all, then I won't be on guard, ready to jump or act or react to, you know, the enemy, whatever it might be.
Well, let's go back to my walking. So the cerebellum in the brain receives these minute pieces of information as we walk from our sensors of our feet and our ears, of the balance this way. And so we're receiving the balance from our vestibular system that includes this beautiful piece of our brain called the cerebellum. It has these um, uh, neurons that all look the same, and they, like a aspen forest, and they communicate out of a resonance. So when we're walking and minutely it can control it, it works just fine. However, if there's a major disruption, the cerebellum needs to tell the nervous system, and it does, hey, there's something off, so the nervous system can react and change it. But what if the message to the cerebellum is always a state of, as you walk, ah, then the cerebellum can't rest. It can't be a resonance of peace. Which, by the way, in the brain, when the cerebellum has a resonance of peace, your whole body's at peace. That's the part of the brain that really is where charisma comes from. That feeling of, oh man, I'm just really, things are cool, things are great, um, and so um, it's receiving messages both physically and emotionally, because it does emotional resonance too, and there's research on that. It's fabulous. And so when it's all the leaves and the trees and the branches, the aspen forest and the cerebellum are resonating as a oneness, it works. But it's not because I've controlled my environment, because on the walking, if I only had peace if I did walk, and if I did move, well, yeah, I could find a resonance of that, but then I wouldn't have any life. I need the resonance being active. I need the resonance of being peace and action and doing life and being life. I can do that. Our body's set up to do that physically, to have a calm peace when you move, and to do that emotionally. So you could be in the midst of a storm and not crumble. That trouble doesn't have to make you crumble. It's very feasible and possible. We have the makeup in our body for the mental and the emotional calm and be at peace and have an enjoyable life. It's there biologically running right now, and you and I, just at this very moment.
Hmm. So I have an interesting question about that. So while you were talking, it made me think of like the heroes of history, right? The people who really stood up and were solid,
Totally.
calm, peaceful, while there were big things happening in the world. In fact, it reminds me of that picture with the guy that's standing in front of the tanks.
Yeah,
They're
China
close
and
but they're
Tiananmen
photographed.
Square. Mhm.
Yeah, and the picture, of course, is from a distance. We don't know what the internal environment of that person or any of those people were, other than there's a lot going on, And then, of course, it shows that, and it's just kind of like they've made this decision. That person decided to make that decision. And then you have Gandhi. I haven't looked this up myself, but I heard it from someone who I believe. He said that Gandhi during World War II told the Jews not to stand up to the Nazis. Said, "Don't fight them. Don't combat with them." And then, of course, you have a lot of various opinions, actions, reactions, all over. And his opinion about it was, well, Gandhi said, "Don't fight them." And he said, but then they were being exterminated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that phrase. Gandhi, of course, was in India and not in Italy, where and Germany and Austria and et cetera. So I'd have to look at the whole thing. But
Yeah,
he was a man of non-confrontation,
for
and
sure.
as opposed to Joan of Arc, who was a woman who was willing, and she said she had a vision that she was to take up a sword, and had a vision of which sword to even take up. She was to go to a particular church, and they found a sword under the altar that had been buried there 300 or 400 years before. So you have one hero who took arms, and the other hero said, "Don't take arms, don't take up your sword, put down your sword." And maybe both of them are right. There's
That's
one common theme between those two heroes, one that took up their sword and one that put down and buried their sword. And both were very bold people, very bold, because in the time in France when she took her sword up, she could have been killed for being a woman and doing what she did. I mean, easily have been. Well, she eventually was killed. Eventually,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
and
Well, and she.
Gandhi too. Gandhi was eventually killed also.
Oh, I
And
don't know.
yeah, um, so both were bold, both courageous, and both had phenomenal peace. Both, and both had phenomenal turmoil. A lot of people think Gandhi didn't have turmoil. Oh, yes, he did. He went through turmoil himself. Mother Teresa went through turmoil. Okay. But there's one common theme for both. It has to do back with that resonance that I was talking about. How do we get to that resonance of peace within themselves? Wait, one took up arms and the other one did take up arms, but they could find that peace, both of them. It had to do with once they decided internally what their truth was, what is it they valued the most, and they were true and courageous and have devoted to whatever they held to be true. That
Mm,
is the key. And their belief system was, whatever their belief system was on the outside is another matter. But on the inside, they remained true to that. And they were okay with it. Now, some people, yes, could have a belief system that could be horrible, like, you know, massacre people. And I understand that's a possibility, but most of the time, I would say 99.999% of the time, because I can't speak for all time and all people, but most of the time, if they are harming people in a way that is that like the Nazis were doing, uh, no, they were not at peace with themselves. Okay. And so when they would do that, eventually they would have to be hard in the heart. Okay. They would have a heart in their body and become mean and have miserable feelings inside because they were going against more core truths because they were harming people. Um, or eventually they would, destroy themselves anyway. With Joan of Arc taking up arms, there was a purpose. And so she wouldn't, I know the story fairly well on this. She had principles like she would never fight on Sunday, for example. And in that time, they thought that was kind of weird. It didn't matter whether it was Sunday, whatever, they would fight. And the armies were like, what? We gotta do that. And there's a story about how she stopped everything. They wouldn't take up arms, and they even had alms or their communion and offered it to the enemy or so. And the enemy didn't attack. There was so much. There was so much assurance. She had so much assurance about her principle, and she stayed so true to it. She would rather die than break her will. Now, eventually, she did make a mistake, and about her will, about not her will, about her values, and that's when she started not feeling good, because
Yeah.
eventually she broke down,
Yeah.
and that's when she started having problems. Okay. Now Gandhi, he knew that his state of mind of no arms could cause a lot of death. That people would fight, and they would fight and fight and fight. And he chose to sacrifice his life with fasting and fast and fast, just and prayer, and that takes a lot of courage. And he had huge, the whole world looking at him. Some of them hated him, some of them talked poorly of him. Even I remember, some of the things that were said um, about him afterwards and things like that. But but he's staying true to what that is. And so part of dealing with the trouble and crumble of the world is you need to know where your true value is, what's important to you. And I mean, some people, they get in trouble and they start recruiting around. They say, well, this person's bad. They'll talk about their boss with other coworkers and they recruit. Well, that's not peace. That's dark. That's not holding true to your value. Getting recruiting that's just war. There's taking up their arm. But that's taking up arms not out of value. Real values doesn't hurt other people and their value. Real values is supporting other people's values while I support my own. That is a major key, because if I have to hurt other people and recruit, now Joan of Arc didn't hurt other people to harm them. She was there to protect, but she didn't recruit and try to have everyone hate the enemy. That wasn't her purpose. She was just there. Then let's do this. Gandhi wasn't trying to say the other group. He wasn't trying to say Islam is bad. He wasn't trying to say the Hindu religion was bad. He was trying to say, let's communicate. Let's communicate at another level rather than do it at this level. So, and I've said a lot about that, but it was a great question. It's a
Yeah.
great challenge, because in a relationship in someone's home where two people are at odds with each other, they need to stop and look at what your true value is. Because if your true value is, well, they hurt me, so I need to hurt them. Well, that's not a value. That has nothing to do with value. That's a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old. The 4-year-old say, well, they hit me. Well, that has to do with justification and punishment. What? That's not value. Okay. Am I
Or fear. Fear would be another, oh, I'm afraid, so therefore I can attack or whatever. It's the same. It can be out of anger or 2-year-old that way, but it can also be out of fear.
exactly? If I attack out of fear, that's not based on value.
No.
That has nothing to do with that value. That's a primal state. That's not a spiritual value. That's not a true emotional value. That's not oneness. That has nothing to do with having all the trees resonate in peace, because
So Joan
fear
of Arc.
is not peace.
No, not at all. So Joan of Arc and Gandhi both, neither of them were motivated out of fear, nor were they motivated out of attack or anger, frustration. They're
No.
motivated, you're saying they're motivated out of value. So I'm gonna be a little bit, I'm gonna have some fun, Ron. I'm gonna do this again. So so let's pull that into the modern day, right?
Okay.
Right now, the biggest conflict that, there's other bigger, but the most prominent, I suppose, would be a mask, right? There's the values. So some people, out of fear, say you need to do this. Now, Joan of Arc, when she offered communion, or what was it? Was it alms or
Yeah,
communion?
and the story, the rumor, whatever is that, yeah, that go ahead, keep going. That happened.
So she offered communion. So in her camp with her army, that was a practice. That was something they did together. And I know she did actually did have quite the requirements of them too, did she not?
Yes,
Where
she did. She
Yeah.
she she had certain values that they would be true to principles that they believed in their religion. Okay, and I'm not saying that everybody should be the religion of Joan of Arc. I'm talking about whatever it is that you hold true that is respectful to other people's values and to your values, and of course the values of whatever they worship. And but anyway, so she had principles, and a lot of the men obviously did not like it, right?
Yeah.
Um, they wanted to fight it, but they wanted to live. They realized, wait, uh, we're winning, the enemy's not, so we're going to do what she says.
Yeah.
They weren't totally dedicated to what she wanted to do, but she was winning, so let's go
She
with
had
her.
their respect enough, based on the
Right.
results of her actions. And that's the beauty of contrasting Joan of Arc versus Gandhi too, is because they had different perspective, a different value. They took different action based on, but the thing is, they both deeply believed in what it was that they had conviction, and they stood strong in the value.
Deep,
So it is cool to
deep
have that
conviction.
contrast and not say, oh, this is the right one and the only right one and always the right one. But saying actually the behavior, the action could be different, but this principle within is the same. So pulling it back into the modern day, there's that value. There's a lot of people out there saying, out of fear, you have to wear the mask, otherwise I will get sick, or you have to do this, otherwise it'll spread, or
Yeah.
the behavior,
A
the
lot of
distance you have
blame, a lot
to
of
spend.
shame, a lot of fear. Um,
A lot of blame, shame, fear, control, dictator, and the dictatorship, of course, there's the state national stuff going on, but there's also the one neighbor to another neighbor. You had 11
yeah,
people
quite
at
a
your
bit
house,
actually. Mhm.
10. you know. So, we went to a birthday party recently, and we had it under 10, but someone that she worked for, or a neighbor of hers or something, they got fined $1,000 because they think they had 12 people. She had 12 people at her house. Her neighbor did, not her, but her neighbor had 12 people at her house. So they fined her $1,000 for having 12 people at her house. And someone
Wow.
someone told on her is what happened. And
Yeah,
so
because
it was
the
only
law
someone
would not have
happened.
known. The law doesn't go house to house. Thank goodness we're not at that level,
Not yet.
obviously.
Yeah.
Not yet. No, I don't believe it has to be there. But even in, I have a client that lived in dictatorship country. I won't mention which one. I won't mention which name that would be conjured up. But yeah, I mean, she's in her 60s and she lived under that totalitarian control until they left that country when she was in her teens, and it was the neighbors that reported that
Yeah.
used jealousy or anger, frustration, and stuff like that. So it's fear about what everybody's going to think. Anyway, go
Yeah.
on. So she was fined, and so you brought that out because
Oh, it's the motivations, right? The motivations of people. So a lot of people feel very just motivation to act in a certain way. No, you do need to behave this way because I deserve safety. This kind of it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. So what you're saying, with these two examples, with Gandhi and with Joan of Arc, is very different from a lot of the behavior that we're seeing in society. It's not, they were not using shame, blame, coercion. They yielded respect from people who knew them and who were, what Joan of Arc's case, people were under her, right? As their army. I don't know if that's the right word, yielded respect, but Gandhi, people listened, people followed because of the strength that they had from within.
well,
Um,
yeah, and valid. They used the strengthener within, and there was those values. And remember, though, they were human. So sometimes Joan of Arc probably did shame simply if they weren't listening. And Gandhi probably did refute people and say, or rebuke, or whatever the word is, to say they were incorrect. But then after the human side gets through their, rah, whatever, they would come back to their own values and principles and say, wait, okay, we're going to do this out of respect and honor, joy and peace, because they just didn't stay there in shame. Now, the other way to shame is they shame and they are upset at people and they think of how horrible people are and things like that. So the individual I mentioned here that lived under totalitarian control, they didn't trust anybody even in their household. It was so dark and it was a gray energy, she said. It was just always gray. Doesn't matter with the sunshine, it was gray because they couldn't have joy because they couldn't even trust people in their own household. It wasn't that their household was bad, that's what happened all the time. And it was lack of trust, which is to me a value. Trust is one of the core values, along with faith and courage. If you lack trust in your body and in your heart and your mind, how can you live in peace? I think it's impossible. It just doesn't work. So in the current environment where we're building up more and more lack of trust and lack of hope, I mean, it's crazy. It's a setup for major pandemic.
Yeah.
They have created more pandemic out of the emotional state than they ever did out of the virus.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Absolutely.
All they had to do at the beginning is say, let's get together and change our health. The countries that are having the worst problems are the ones that have health problems like crazy. They don't eat right, they don't live right. Okay. And create an environment of, okay, when you're sick, yeah, stay home. That's great. That's good. Honor everybody by staying home. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you're not sick, yeah, be in the public. I mean, it could have gone so much calmer. But no, we're going to control. Right? And then they go primal, and then it sets up that a body is more susceptible, the immune system is affected by our emotional state. Boom. It's been researched, it's been shown. Why don't we come back to values and respect and joy and working with each other and living that way as the first step of our attack on a virus rather than the last step. It's the same thing of people who get divorced and then they go to anger management classes. Hello, go to anger management classes before marriage rather than after you've been destroyed.
Wow.
Yeah. Bizarre. Everything's backwards sometimes.
Very much so.
Isn't this fun to talk about?
Yeah, it's interesting that the decisions and things that are being made, how they influence us and everybody else, and at the same time, how important it is that we still continue to make our own decisions to continue to build a life. Because really, if you think about it, if everybody, like if this message spread, let's say, right, the message that hey, how about seeking peace and safety in a way that is in concert with one another rather than in opposition to one another. If that message spreads and people started, rather than going down the dictator role with themselves, with others, with their cities, with whatever it is that they control in their life or try to, that message could lessen the pandemic. That message could increase the color in our life, right? And and hope and trust and fun, and that message could also bring back some of the freedoms and joys and natural things that we just enjoy with life.
Right. Very well said and very true. And it is time once again, it is time once again throughout all history to be reminded of this. Humans are humans. A lot of people think of the end of days. Hello, it is the end of days, no matter when we live. Doesn't matter if it was 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, or today. Pay attention to the now, the present. Live as if tomorrow is going to end, but not in a negative way, not out of fear, but out of joy, peace. That is the gift of the privilege of knowing that someday it'll change. But at least for today, enjoy the sun that shines now. Because the energy of the sun is going to change someday, of course, just like all things. Fossil fuels will burn up someday. They won't be able to find it anymore someday. Rather than fear of that day, let's live in the faith of the day, right? And they
Yeah.
say seize the day. I say faith the day, value the day, trust the day, peace in the day. So,
Mm.
and thank you so much for having this fun conversation.
Thank you, Ron. That was very insightful and fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It gives me great joy
Yeah,
to
me
share.
too.
So, um, okay, well, until another discussion at another time.
Sounds great. Till then.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.